Hey class, I am here to give you a brief explanation about our speech here today. So I'm sharing my screen with you, and I hope that you can in fact see that. But I wanted to go over the prompt. So go ahead and pull that out with you, or while we follow along, if you want to take notes. This is a 2 to 3 minute speech, and your purpose is going to be to justify the effectiveness of an artifact. So being an image, advertisement, a comic strip, a piece of discourse, a tweet, a meme, anything that you want, in its effectiveness of persuasion according to Aristotle. So remember that the criteria of effectiveness doesn't mean that something sold a lot of products, or that it was, or that people bought it, or that people bought into the idea. But think of this as if you are a student of Aristotle and you are taking this artifact on your own and you're presenting it to him, and you're like, look what I did. Would he be like, that's effective? Or would he say that's ineffective? According to the standards of his view of rhetoric. And what you are going to do to justify this effectiveness is use his vehicles of persuasion, which are the proofs. And that's your ethos and your pathos and your logos. Those are going to serve as the main points for your speech. And within those main points, I am going to expect seeing pieces of evidence, whatever symbolically is represented within the image or within the text, that will serve as supplementary material for your proof. So another option could also be to bring in an artifact that is not effective. It doesn't use the ethos, pathos, logos in a sound way. And so you can choose to take either or. I do not want you to take a image and say it is both effective and ineffective. And although a lot of images are ineffective and effective, bottom line is that if it has a ineffective part of it, then Aristotle would say don't do. Um, your main points will be organized the same way, but your justification is going to be a bit different. So what I think that you need to do is think and consider these things. Feel free to only use 2 of the 3 proofs for this speech, like I said, meaning you only have to use 2 main points because the interest of time. Make sure that you are timing yourself. And I'm almost willing, because we have a small class, to take that up to 3 to 4, just for the purpose of you feeling a little bit more confident. So feel free. I think that we can spare that extra minute. But if you skip it to a 2 to 3 because I've established it that way, that's also fine. Remember that you can prove the artifact effective or ineffective according to Aristotle. And then for the purpose of this speech, like I said, the artifact can't be both effective and ineffective. So here's the structure that we're looking at. And the same structure stands that you've been doing probably your entire life of public speaking, but also the same structure that we did in our first speech is what I'm looking for. So we're going to start off with some type of attention-getting device. Keep it simple and keep it easy, but remember that it should connect to the central idea of this speech, which is effective rhetoric. So if your content is effective, you could maybe use something in the beginning that would relate to that effectiveness. What I don't want are attention getters that are playing on the artifact, meaning that the artifact itself isn't necessarily the effective, well, it is the effective or ineffective, but the content of the artifact, I don't want it to be the guiding force of your attention getter, because that really is going to take away from the ethos and pathos. So a generalized idea about effectiveness or ineffectiveness may work. A question to the audience, a statement, perchance even if this artifact was disseminated to the masses and you know the information, or you know some kind of contextual information about the artifact, let's say, and you knew that a bunch of people bought it, and maybe it was a big failure that could be a way that you could incorporate um, that kind of information as even attention getter. Like, do you know a product that sold 400 million and products, and 399 million of them got sick? Well, blah, blah, like, or a Samsung Galaxy. Imagine it. You're sitting on a plane, something explodes. It's your cell phone. You were so excited about getting this phone, but you're confused as to what is happening. Well, you maybe have been the victim of a Samsung, right? I don't know. That I'm just making this up, but this is a way that you could do it. The next thing that you do after that is you reveal the topic. So this is where you are going to show us the artifact. So this is where you will go to your visual aid station. You'll reveal the artifact and you'll communicate what you think they are trying to persuade us. So it's important that here you establish like what was the end goal. So we know that like some of the commercials are to establish a belief system. Some of them are to get you to buy into a value. Some of them are to get you to vote a particular way. Maybe they want you to agree with a of disliking somebody or disliking an ideal. What is the end goal? So make that clear when you reveal the topic. But additionally, don't forget, and that means reveal the artifact, don't forget to show the artifact and give any type of background information that we are not going to get in the body. So if in your like ethos section of your body, for example, you're going to be talking about an individual's credibility who's used in the artifact, you don't need to go over all of that also in your introduction. A simple when this artifact was used or where you got it, where it came from, what time period it existed within, that is the information that you can tell there. And then the final thing that you are going to do is give this thesis statement. And I've gone ahead and written one up for you that you can go ahead and use. And if you see the coloring is there to decipher where the main points are and what the central idea is. So something like to show how this artifact was effective according to Aristotle and its persuasive rhetoric, I will describe its use of ethos, pathos, and logos. Like I said, I am requiring you to use logos as a main point, regardless if you use pathos or regardless of, well, let me say it this way. If you choose to do 2 main points, logos needs to be one of them. And if you choose to do all 3, then obviously logos will be one of them. But if you choose to do 2, do ethos and logos or pathos and logos, because I need to understand that you get reasoning. Okay. So if you have the time, do ethos, pathos, logos. If not, choose the most 2 relevant ones that you could do. Once you get that thesis statement, you're ready to go into your first main point. So something like, and let me even write this in here, to begin, let me show, or let's look at how this artifact is successful according to Aristotle by examining its use of ethos, right? And then we go into the ethos, if you want to go into ethos first. But these are the points that you should hit in your main points. In this main point, you should describe ethos. So I am going to want a description. You can either give a definition from your reading using quotes, or you can summarize as a suggestion of your reading. So something like the reading, the Aristotle reading suggests that ethos is blah, 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 blah. Or if you want to get an ethos definition from somewhere outside the class, that's fine as well. But after establishing that definition, then you're going to go in and you're going to describe how that artifact uses the ethos. And by the way, I shouldn't even just be saying ethos, but I should be saying like pathos and logos as well. But the ethos, so what I want you to do is give me 2 at least examples or different ways that ethos is being utilized. And as an effective speaker to get your audience to follow along with you, I encourage us to use key phrases within our main points that say something like the first way it uses, or this artifact uses ethos effectively, is through its use of a credible figure. And the second way it uses ethos, and then you'll give all that information in detail and you'll point out and you'll show how it ties in together. And then you'll say another example of effective ethos in this artifact is where it highlights the company name. And then you can talk about how that company has been effective for a long time and how there's ethic or competence built into it. Now, here's the key with ethos. We know that ethos has two parts to it. Ethos has both character and competence. And so if you wanted to with ethos, you could make your first main point that it uses ethos, and I'll show you how by explaining how it uses this competence and character. And those could be your two examples or your two resources, rather than saying something like by using a individual who is an expert and also using an individual and also using a company name. Both of those things exude competence. So if there is any type, if you're talking about competence only, then refer to competence only. If you're talking about competence and character, then you can break it down like into those two parts. But ensure that you are talking about whether there's competence or character used. And you may even want to establish that in your definition up front of the ethos. So then once you're done, you can go on to your next main point. And for me, I'm going to just go through like your pathos. So in this main point, same idea. First, you'll set up what pathos is. You can give a definition from the text or from your own idea, and then you're going to go in and talk about some of the resources of pathos that are used. There's probably going to be a multitude of them, but I encourage you to streamline that to 2 to 3 ways that it's using it effectively or ineffectively. And remember, pathos, this idea of emotional appeal, like, is it true? Is it representative of the situation? Is it being used without any type of reasoning? If it's being used in a not sound way, you can make note of how that is ineffective and why we shouldn't be using the pathos in that way. But if you want to point out the different elements of emotional appeal that you can bring in, and this could be like through words that draw about a value, through the entire encompassed picture maybe creates this ideal of this value. Maybe there's specific words that are popping out to give you a sense of value. And it's going to be good in your introduction. Remember that if you give us that detail as to what like their end goal was and what the purpose was or what to buy into, if you have a value up here, it's really going to be important that you are explaining how that is created also through the use of emotion down here. And if not, if it's simply getting us to buy like Coca-Cola, remember that a lot of values are ingrained in our emotional attachment as well. So the penis example with the cigarette that I gave you in class, it can bring about a sense of like emotional attachment. And so I would encourage you to describe like the underlying value within that. The last thing that we are going to do is go into logos. And this is very, don't think of it as being super difficult. I just want to see that you can understand the different types of reasoning. And if you see that an artifact has maybe additional, like, so if it's inductive and also causal, you can describe the induction or you can describe the causal. You do not need to do both. I simply want to see that you know a type of reasoning that is being used. And so in this main point, you're going to describe what logos is, and you can do that in your own words, or you can again use an example from the text. Then you should describe how that artifact is using logos, and they're going to be using logos through what we call a process of reasoning, as we know, because that's what logos is, logic, and logic is a process of reasoning with the information you get to draw to a conclusion. And thus, what types of reasoning are being used? Deductive. And if you're going to use deductive, we need to establish as to whether that is a syllogism or it's an enthemy. Then you can use the induction, you can use causal reasoning, and finally you can use analogical reasoning. So those are the 4 types of reasoning. Again, deduction is going to have a syllogism or an enthemy. Sorry, the induction is going to be one, the causal reasoning, and the analogical reasoning. Why does it even have an etc.? There's nothing there. Then explain how the logos was effective or ineffective, assisting in the persuasive nature of the artifact's message, according to Aristotle. So in this case, based upon your fallacy checklist, you can establish if something is effective or ineffective based upon that list as well. Making sure that there aren't grand generalizations. If you're using the deduction, that your first premise is something that is in fact true. If you're doing causal reasoning, does the cause justify the effect? If you're doing an analogy, are the analogies or are the comparing situations or the comparing people, they're comparing ideals, correct and true? So once you have finished your logos, you'll then move on to conclusion, something like in conclusion, and all I simply want you to do is repeat your thesis, right? So to conclude today, I've told you a bit about this artifact's use of ethos, pathos, logos, and how it was effective according to the guidelines of Aristotle. And then you'll go back to your attention getter, or whatever you started with, we can resonate at the end. So that is where I am going to, simply for the purpose of this lecture, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to create another one for each of you that is going to also be an artifact lecture, much like we did in class yesterday. I'll go through a couple with you, and I would encourage each of you to go through this on your own and practice with me and try to identify what they are before I do, and at least start to see the elements that I would pick out and how I would justify it and how I would describe it. So consider that next video much like a rubric that you would have for a grading.